Hi, Jay Fallon here. Thanks for listening to the Slippery Slope. So I want to continue the discussion on what's happening with in here in Queensland with the inquiry into the Queensland Police Service. So obviously there was this inquiry into the domestic violence situations that Queensland Police attend, and how lacking they were in their services at times, and the violence that it's caused, the further angst that it's caused within the community. But also there was the inquiry also went further into issues in the Queensland Police regarding racism, lots of sexism, this kind of thing. So the outcome of the inquiry basically said, that nothing was going to happen. They got a slap on the wrist. No one lost their jobs. There was one of the recommendations was that they need to have they need to change one of the investigative units that investigate police, and investigate misconduct and this kind of thing. And instead of being run by police, it should be run by civilians. The police union, who in my mind, they're a bit of a joke, to be honest, but Ian Lever stood up and he rejected that just outright. I've got to say, I think the police union are a large part of the problem. They don't really stand up for the police themselves. Ian Levers collects a very, very handsome paycheck, and he'll stand up on the little issues, gets out there and rings the bell for things that don't really matter. But when it comes to really instituting change, he doesn't want real change to happen, because I think it will shine light on how lacking the police union are as well, not just the police service. However, I just want to go through this this interview that happened last night on the project, and just add a bit of commentary to that, and I'll stop it along the way and just share my shorts on that anyway.
Queensland Police Commissioner Katarina Carroll has pleaded for people to have faith in her and her officers, despite a damning report into police culture in the Sunshine State. A 5-month inquest into responses to domestic violence found a failure of leadership allowed sexism, misogyny and racism to fester in the ranks. She's received the backing of Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk.
The Commissioner of the Queensland Police, Katarina Carroll, joins us now. Commissioner, you've been in charge for 3 years. Now we learn that this is the state of the force, and the report specifically states a failure of leadership.
Just before I go on playing this, so she has been in charge. She's been the commissioner for 3 years. However, she has been in the upper ranks, the upper echelon of leadership for well over a decade, actually. Once you reach the rank of inspector and above, you're a commissioned officer. Really, you can start instituting change realistically. And adding to that she was one of the very few and one of the very first female officers to start making it up into these upper ranks. I mean, ever since I started in the police over a decade ago, she was already, I believe it was a superintendent then. So for them to talk about, oh, she's only been in this role for 3 years, but she has been in a very high ranking leadership role for well over a decade, and she has never I never saw her trying to institute change. All these things that she could have been doing and she could have been pushing for, not just as a commissioner. You never heard anything out of her, because it suited her needs for the status quo to keep going along and for her to keep pushing up the ranks. Anyway, I'll keep going with this.
As the reason for it, why should Australians and Queenslanders have confidence in your leadership?
Yes, thank you for that question, and I really do believe they should. I have been involved in extensive reforms and foreign emergency services before here, as well as a Queensland Police Service when I came back. I've been here for 3 years. It has been obviously a difficult 3 years for Queensland Police and policing per se. I've implemented an extraordinary amount of reforms during that period of time, and I truly believe that I should go on and finish those reforms as well.
This report is about widespread systemic problems, but you've previously said these are isolated cases. Are you in denial?
No, definitely not. I have said that we...
Yeah, she did say that these were isolated cases, and as I said, she has been involved in the upper echelon of leadership for a long time. So there is not a chance, there is not a snowflake's chance in hell that she did not know about some of these systemic problems, but it benefited her and her career. And that's why she's never stood up before now. And I'll remind you too that she didn't even want to face the inquiry. She said that there was nothing to answer to. And it was only because she was basically forced to face the inquiry and face questioning. Anyway.
We have issues in the organisation. We haven't swept it under the carpet. You know, I've read the report. I was in the Commission of Inquiry.
Yeah, sorry, they have swept it under the carpet. Like I said, no one's losing their job. Anyway.
I know of those issues, and for me as the head of the organisation, they are very, very difficult to listen to. It's very, very tough to, admit that we have people like this in the organisation, and that is what reform is all about.
Do you retract then the idea that these are isolated cases, or do you still stick to that even in the face of the report?
No, there are some areas where it is the best culture, great leadership, and there's other areas where there's definitely more concern. So when you look across the organisation, and it's a vast organisation of 17,500 people, the vast majority are good people doing great work. However, there are some areas that I said are more concerning at others. When you're reforming an organisation, it needs to be organisational reform across many areas, procedures, processes, so it has to be widespread reform.
And yet no one's lost their job. How will you reform things without getting rid of the people that you referred to who are letting the force down?
We've spoken a lot in obviously recent months, the difficulty currently in removing people from the organisation, and I've got legal advice to take a certain course of action in relation to some of these people. In fact, I have gone back and reviewed all of the cases to look at...
Just stopping there. Now, I personally know of cases, okay, where people they should have lost their job. And this is why I talk about also the Queensland Police Union and why they are so much to blame too for some of this. There's been times when police officers could have lost their jobs, and the police and the police union have gone in to bat for them and gone to court for them, and they've been allowed to keep their jobs. So, for her to say, she's received legal advice and all this, there's been so many other issues, so many times when she could have stepped in and said that she's lost faith in this officer and that, they are not, they're not living up to the standard for a police officer, but she hasn't done it. There has been instances where she could have just given a letter of dismissal to officers, but they've chosen not to because they don't want the fight. They don't want the argument. And so even it's, when she talks about trying to institute reform, they constantly shy away from reform until now when they're being pushed into it. That was the only way. Anyway, continue.
What further action I can take. Some of these members will, one in particular and others in the next few weeks, will be told to show cause as to why they are suitable to stay in the agency. It is something that is difficult to work through. I have already spoken to my minister that if this is not effective, that we really do need to have the conversation to make the legislation more effective into the future.
You've indicated that you're looking at ways of removing people from the force who you think need to be removed. Given that the report says the failure was a failure of leadership, how many of the leadership are in that category?
I think that we all need to be held accountable. You know, I need to be held accountable. When I look back at the reform journey, you look at yourself, you look at the things that you've done, you look at the decisions that you've made, and in hindsight, you should have made other decisions, but that makes you a better leader for the future. And everyone, and even leadership, you know, comes to this with the right intent. Without malice, to try and do the right thing.
But they also come to this. They come to this in failure, if we are to believe the report. Is it tenable, given what we've just learned, that no one in the leadership team loses their job?
I've got to see, you know, what has happened in the leadership team. The leadership team want to take this forward, and it has been extraordinary reform over the last 3 years. It is complex.
Sorry, she says the leadership team want to take this forward, but there are so many within the leadership team which are the problem. And Katarina Carroll, being part of the problem and using the system to benefit herself and her career is not about to try and push out the leadership team who have supported her and her progression in the past. So, you know, unless journalists, unless politicians step up, unless journalists step up and keep asking the hard questions, it's not going to happen. Not if this just is allowed to just keep, you know, stay quiet on everything.
It is complex. And I think there needs to be an opportunity to continue with this piece of work. And as I said, there's high confidence. I have high confidence that we will deliver.
You've spoken about your personal history before. What sort of sexism did you experience?
Just in regards to this personal history and this sexism that she endured. Now, I'm not trying to downplay what's allegedly happened to her, but as I've said, she has been in the job. She was a police officer for a very long time. She was been in the upper echelon of leadership for a long time. She never spoke about this publicly. I would have, in my mind, if you experienced the kind of sexism that she experienced, if you endured that, well, then you would, as soon as you start going into these upper ranks, you would be trying to make reform then and there, because you've got a passion, you've got a desperation to make change because you've experienced it firsthand. Yet we never heard about it at all until she was on the stand with this inquiry. Never heard. She never even looked like she was trying to make reform, and she never ever spoke about sexism. She actually denied that this kind of behaviour was systemic within the police service.
I joined in 1983. A few horrific incidents actually in the 80s and the 90s. I brought those to the attention of a supervisor as well as my work colleagues. It was my work colleagues particularly with respect to one predator that protected me. And there were a lot less systems in place to deal with this and processes back then, and I have experienced it, and because I have, I'm actually very passionate about this. This is incredibly important.
Yeah, she's very passionate about it, but she was never passionate about it until she was being questioned in the inquiry. Like I said, she's been in leadership for a long time. She wasn't passionate about it 5, 6, 7 years ago. She wasn't passionate about when she was an inspector, a superintendent, you know, a deputy commissioner. She was never passionate about it then. Only when the going gets tough and people start asking the hard questions, now she's suddenly passionate about it.
Important to me.
Commissioner, it would have been very easy for you not to speak to us tonight. We do thank you very much for fronting up and answering.
So there you go. The Commissioner giving her excuses, giving a little yarn about what she's allegedly going to do. My prediction is that unless journalists keep asking the hard questions, unless politicians step up, none of the leadership that are actually at fault will lose their job. None of them. I don't believe it'll happen. The Commissioner, in a lot of ways, she's a part of the blame, because she did know, I believe she did know that a lot of this stuff, obviously she knew about the sexism if she's experienced it all those years ago. And yet only last year she said, no, this isn't systemic. It's just little bits and pieces. Like I said, she has had the ability. She's been within the leadership ranks where she could have started instituting change, calling for change a long, long time ago. But it's never been a priority because the system and the way that it works suited her and suited her to be able to progress through the ranks. That's just my opinion. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope. Please like and share. Give me a comment. Let me know what you think about this whole debacle, whether people should lose their jobs. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope.